Hi there, this is Maneesh, and I'm bringing to you yet another episode on being Maneesh. In this particular episode, I wish to discuss one of the most motivational movies that made a huge difference in my life. It is inspirational as well, but there are a lot of other movies which are even more inspirational. But here, my focus is on the most motivational movie that I've ever seen, and that made a huge difference in my life. In order to know more, and to be very honest, you're not going to regret it, keep watching. The movie that I'm talking about is based on a true story. Yes, for the purposes of movie, there is a little bit of a dramatization, a little bit, a minor few changes of events, but surprisingly, this movie actually recreates 90% of what really happened. This movie is in English, and it's about a person from New Zealand. We are talking about a person called Bert Munro. Well, New Zealanders call it Bert Munro. Well, I am not with that kind of pronunciation, so I'm just going to stick to my own, which is typical Indian pronunciation, and that is Bert Munro. Now, when we talk about Bert Munro, he was born, I think, maybe way earlier than 20s or something like that. And at that point of time, he also took part in the World War, not as a typical soldier, but I think more as a supply chain guy. And he was posted in Japan. Once the war was over, he came back and he actually bought a 1927, I think 1927 motorcycle called the Indian. Uh, so Indian is a motorcycle brand which is not doing very well as of today. It's still there, right? And when I say Indian, it's not like the India Indian. It's basically based on the Native Americans, which mistakenly all the Europeans ended up calling it India. I mean, I have no clue why they did it. They lost their way and they went to a totally different continent and they still, out of arrogance, call those guys Indians, right? Well, that's another point, but this particular motorcycle company is based on the Native Americans called the Indians. And within that, they had a model called the Scout. So Burt Munro basically owns a 1927 Indian Scout. Now, the top speed of those motorcycles at that point of time was probably 50 kilometers or 50 miles an hour. I mean, in those days, people used to still talk in miles. In US, they still do. Talk about retrospective. But the point is, it used to do something like max 55, 60 miles an hour or so, right? That was the top speed. And this person got fascinated with motorcycles. And the best part is he never changed his motorcycle. So when he was in New Zealand, and he was a New Zealander, and basically he kept on modifying, his motorcycle, kept on modifying it. And he would take, you know, unprofessional kind of or unrecognized races, and he would win. So he had a local following, but he had a dream in his mind, and his dream was to see how fast his motorcycle Scout, I'm just going to call it Scout. You might get confused when I say Indian. So he would really wanted to know how fast his Scout could actually go, because he kept on modifying it. He redid the entire engine. He did the entire aluminum casting and the alloy casting himself at his own home. And he would spend all his money doing that. And he wanted to know that if I went to Utah, the Salt Lake, and see where all the car companies of the world would come and test how fast their cars and vehicles could go, he wanted to do the same, except he didn't have any money. And in fact, he was a pretty ordinary person, a person who's lower than middle class of New Zealand. He had a plot of land, and there's a city called Inver Cargill. I may be pronouncing it wrong. New Zealand names, not easy to take. So this person was there and he had a plot of land, and within that land he just had a small house, like literally one room and one washroom. That's all. That's it, because he couldn't afford more. And he wanted to spend all his money, whatever that he was earning or the pensions that he was getting, only on fulfilling his life dream, and that is see how fast his Indian grows. But the thing about this movie is that Burt Munro actually was 68 years old when he finally collected enough money and finally went to US. And he shipped his motorcycle. The entire outer casing, to make it absolutely streamlined, was completely made by himself. The entire bike was completely redone. The wheelbase were increased. The chain and the timing cycles, everything was recalibrated. And he was already doing something like 125 miles in per hour kind of a speed in New Zealand, right? But he never had a huge, straight stretch where you could actually gun the engine for nearly 15, 20 minutes nonstop to figure out how fast the, vehicle actually goes. And well, he had to do that in Utah because that's the only place in the world where you have absolute natural flatlands where you can really let it out. So he starts doing that. But the only problem is that he has already suffered 2 heart attacks. Not only that, he had, a certain amount of prostate problems coming up. It was on the verge of becoming cancerous, right? And he still wanted to, live to his dream. The beauty about this movie or this story is the kind of character that Burt Munro had. Now, Burt basically was a very easygoing person. He was so focused on his, this dream of his, that he would constantly think about that. But in doing so, he was never bitter with anybody.
That's our phone number. Do you think you'll break the record?
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
Dad doesn't think you can do it.
Oh, is that what he said?
He says everyone thinks that.
Oh, well.
Except me.
Ah, you're good. Good boy, Tom. Yeah.
He was never antisocial. He was never narcissistic, which is basically what is associated with, these cliched, focused people, particularly when you watch stories from US or other European countries.
I'll tell you something, son. If you don't follow through on your dreams, you might as well be a vegetable.
Now, the point is that this gentleman comes through as a breath of fresh air. And that's what they say, that in the real world, Burt Munro was actually like this. He was easygoing. He could actually strike a conversation with anybody at any point of time. So in order to make some money, he actually challenged one of the local, young guys, in 67, 65, 66, 67. There were a lot of local motorcycle gangs, right? You know how the 60s and 70s were horribly, how do I say, bad mannered youth, right? So basically, they had a group like that in Invercargill as well, and he bet with them with all his savings, whatever that he could do, that he would like to, challenge them for a straight, a test. But the point is, those guys were driving more recent bikes like Nortons and other things, but they were not customized. They were, stock bikes, so they were agile. But this bike was the Scout of Burt Munro was streamlined. So the race is done on the sea beach, and what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to race to a particular point, go around that point, and come back. The person who actually comes back the fastest wins. Now he takes that up. The point is that when he starts, he actually leaves them behind, literally in the dust, as if those guys were not even moving. He went so fast. But the problem was turning around. Now this bike is streamlined and he couldn't turn around. So when he comes back, he falls down because of the turn. And by the time he gets his bike up, it doesn't start, so many other things, and those guys win. So they take away the money. But the point is, people, those absolutely loud-mouthed, horrible people, youth of those days, they still liked him so much that they gave back his money. They financed part of his trip to US, shipping the cargo, the bike and stuff like that. A lot of people came forward there, the neighborhoods and all. A lot of people pitched in so that he can live up to his dream. And he's already had 2 heart attacks. Never forget that, right? And he's literally on heart pills. Like every day he has to take a couple of pills to make sure that his blood is thin enough and he's not going to get that heart attack. So it's basically a blood thinner. Now, when he goes to US, when he arrives in US, he has to live on a shoestring, budget. So he basically takes up a room, which is one of the cheapest, but that's basically a shady place, right? Where people rent rooms by the hour. I think you get what I'm saying. And the receptionist is basically a transgender person, and not many people speak to her or him her because he chose to be called her, so let's call her her. So this person, people were not nice to her, and this guy has never met a transgender, but he is really nice to her, and she even helps him, get the bike out of the customs. In customs, the way Americans usually work, they really don't bother about other people's stuff. So some heavy crate is loaded on top of his bike and stuff like that. And he's really worried whether his bike is broken or not. And they kind of figure it out and they realize that no, the bike is safe. So he never, utters any kind of a ugly or tries to sue them or things like that. The customer people are scared that this guy is going to, screw their happiness or sue them. Basically, he doesn't do anything of that. All he says is, all right, the Indian lives to fight another day. And basically, that's what endears him to people. He's so focused about what he wants to do that every chance that he gets, he celebrates. Every little thing he celebrates. And this celebratory aspect of his is what endears him to people, because that's something that they find missing in their own life. They're too busy judging others. They're too busy comparing their life with others. They're too busy trying to make a living or a standard which they're comparing with somebody else. And this guy doesn't bother about any of that. And that's why people really start liking him, no matter where he goes. He drives on the wrong side of the road, as per American standards, which I feel is the Americans drive on the wrong side of the road, but he gets into trouble with the police, and yet they kind of let him go. They kind of like him, the way he says it, the way he agrees to his mistakes, the way he takes care of the other people. He strikes a deal with a very shady, second-hand cars dealer, but that fellow, because the way he helps him out with other cars to tune them better, he actually gives him a very good deal for a trailer so that he can actually carry his Indian, this scout, motorcycle attached behind a second-hand car, right? And all the way to Utah. And then he gives lifts to a lot of people on the way, and he gives them a lot of guidance, life guidance and stuff like that. So people all over really like him. Right? And that's something that you can learn. You don't have to be bitter. Just because life is hard with you, you don't have to be bitter. Right? And the most motivational aspect of this is that if you're focused, even if you're focused, you don't have to be antisocial. You don't have to rub people the wrong way. In fact, this actually shows that how you can involve others in your journey towards success, and how others will help you out and help you and propel you towards success if you're nice to them. Genuinely, not superficially, actually genuinely nice, right? And that's basically what people love about him. So he goes to Utah and he comes to know that he can't take part in the race because you're supposed to have registered about a year in advance. And yet, because of his resilience, his absolute fantastic nature, never say die spirit, he literally makes those other racers who have got their glitzy machines, who have got sponsorship of millions of dollars in 1967, that kind of money, behind them, backing them, he inspires them. And they start, the biggest names in racing, they start rooting for this guy. He has a safety inspection problem with his bike because he's the one who's made up his bikes completely. There are a lot of things missing. And yet everybody agrees finally. They even give him money, yeah, because everything costs in US, right? So the people around, they actually pass the hat around. They collect a lot of money for this guy. And finally he gets to race over there. And when he does, he actually broke the world speed record for a two-wheeler, right, which is powered on internal combustion engine. And he goes on to reach 205 miles per hour. In the process, he burns his legs because of the heat from the exhaust. All of that is true and very nicely shown in the movie. And this movie, the main actor, the person who plays the role of Burt Munro, is basically done by none other than Anthony Hopkins. Now, this guy is a great actor, right? And he kind of literally melts into this particular role. And that's why this movie is so great. The storytelling, the ease with which you can watch this movie, it's not only feel good, it's a kind of movie that helps you realize that literally you can make this world what you want it to be because of your behavior, right? Be the change that you want in this world. And he inspires people. He makes people fall in love with him. And the best part, like I've not even told you the best part, when he actually wins 200 and creates a world record, the rest of the people are crazy. They're shouting like, "Hey man, he created the world record, world record!" And what he says is he's least thought about the world record. He simply says, "Man, that is the fastest my bike has ever grown. Let me do something more, and I think it's gonna go faster." What does it tell you? He's not really competing with anybody else. And that is the root of his happiness. That is the root of his satisfaction. That is the root of his ability to enjoy every living moment because he's not competing. He doesn't want to be the best. He simply wants to see how fast can he go. And he spends an entire lifetime doing that, even if it takes to be nearly 70 years old with 2 heart attacks and a prostate cancer on its way to be able to, break the world record. And of course, he goes on to US a couple of more times till the age of 70 to actually break his own records multiple times. In fact, on the way, he meets a true Indian. I mean, that's a really amazing thing. Again, I said, look at me, I'm speaking like an American. No, he meets an American native Indian, the original Americans, one of the persons, and he that Native American actually helps Burt Munro because his car breaks down, stuff like that, and he tells him that, listen, my bike is named after you. And no wonder it's a powerful bike. And he kind of likes it because they're usually used to racism. I mean, they're just reduced to circus. Of basically, they live in reservations. They don't have a life in the very land that they own, which is completely decimated by the people from Europe and claiming it to be their own. And here's another European, or basically a Caucasian, who's actually being very nice, genuinely. So this guy, the Native American, actually gives him a special powder which actually makes his prostate problems go away almost instantaneously. The Ayurvedic of the Native Americans. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that this person is what people should be like. It does not mean that if you're very affable, that you're liked by people, you don't have focus. Of course, you have focus. But for some reason, particularly the US-based literature, the US-based culture, the US-based movies have made us believe that if you're very focused, you're a little eccentric. You don't like people. People don't like you. They don't understand you. You have to be a dominant person, or you have to put people under the thumb. You have to be manipulative. Absolutely not. This is what I like about this movie, right? In fact, in India, I'm sure there are many such motivational stories, real life stories. Have we shared them? We have not. And that's a problem, right? What movies are we making, right? There's so many great stories, we don't share them. In case you're wondering, Maneesh, you've really talked for a long time, but you've not even mentioned the name of the movie. Well, I did that on a purpose. The name of the movie is The Fastest Indian. I tried to search it on Amazon and I tried to search it on Netflix. I've not found it so far. This movie was made in 2005, and get hold of this movie. Beg, borrow, steal. Watch this movie. You will not regret it even for once. All right. This is Maneesh Vijay bringing to you yet another episode of Being Maneesh. Here's was a little bit of a story, really motivational story that really changed my life. Watch this movie. You'll thank me. Take care, guys. I'll catch you later. And by the way, subscribe and share it to the people. It helps me. Take care.